think the internet has made me feel behind for no reason. And I don't mean this in the sense that I'm not doing anything with my life. I mean being behind this world in this very vague and consistent way. Like no matter what I'm working on, no matter how much progress I make, there's always the feeling that I should be further ahead by now. I should have more money, a clearer plan, more discipline, be working harder. I should already be living a completely different version of my life. And I think a lot of that comes from being online. Because when you spend enough time on the internet, especially around the business, self-improvement, and entrepreneurship space, you start to absorb all of these invisible standards as to what success is supposed to look like. And the issue really is that the standard just keeps moving. And I think just for years, I've never really felt like I've been on track even when I was doing things that were objectively useful, like working on the business back that, but the business that I was working on, working on a YouTube, learning skills, etc. It always felt like the goalposts were kept, like they basically kept moving. One day success was making your first bit of money online, then it was making 10,000 a month, becoming financially free, moving abroad, having a business that runs without you, having complete control over your time. And none of these things are inherently bad, right? Because I want to make money, I want to be able to travel, live in different places, and actually do things that give me freedom. But I think there's a point where ambition stops actually feeling exciting, where ambition just becomes this constant pressure, which isn't really enjoyable. Because there's no shortage of people online telling you what success is, right? They're always going to say, if you're not doing this, you're falling behind. If you're not making this amount of money, you're not going to be able to live or do X, Y, and Z. If you're not working 12 hours a day, you don't want it badly enough. And if you're enjoying yourself now, then you're sacrificing your future. And, to some level, I do get why this content exists, right? To some level, it can get people, sort of moving forward. And maybe to some level, it's a sales tactic to get someone to buy a course or a system or whatever. I think the issue is that even though it can give a sense of urgency, I think for me, it never really worked like that. I think for me, just being constantly told that I'm behind doesn't really make me more focused. I think it just made everything feel a lot heavier and it made progress feel a lot smaller. And it also just made normal life and interactions feel like a distraction. Because even when I'm doing something I care about, there's always that background voice saying, well, yeah, but is this enough? And I think that's honestly where it becomes the recipe for disaster. Because when you're working on meaningful things, but you still feel like you're failing just simply because you're comparing your pace to someone else, right? To someone else in terms of what they're doing, it just never works out that good. And in the end, I sort of think about, right, well, do I need to work more hours, have more discipline, more output, and etc. And I'm not going to say that you don't need to sacrifice things or you don't need to output as much. I mean, I had to do that more so when I was pushing to get my demo and my full game out, right, that I was sort of working on. But I think just part of it as well is going, well, the difference between working hard because you care about something and working hard because you feel guilty for existing at normal speed. I think that's the difference I'm noticing because there's this common idea that you have to sacrifice your 20s or sacrifice all your free time and enjoyment so you can finally live the life you want later. And I do get the logic, right? There are, those seasons and times where you do need to focus. But I just really don't like the idea where you just have to simply suffer the whole time to eventually enjoy your life, right? I feel like that's a dangerous way to think. Because again, what happens if you reach the goal you wanted and then immediately you create a new one? Immediately that goalpost sets even further, right? And what happens if you spend those years training yourself to feel behind, and then when you actually get somewhere, you still don't really feel like you've arrived? And I think that's sort of what the internet can quietly do without you realizing a lot of the time, right? It teaches you to measure your life against, what you don't have yet, right? It sort of tells you all the things that you don't have, makes you feel all the things that you lack in order for you to basically realize, I don't know, perhaps that you just don't have enough and you need to keep working. And, I think for me as well, like this can often come up with creative projects. Like when I'm working, for example, on my game that I make with AI, like I want to take it seriously. I want it to be good, right? And I do want it to be something which other people can enjoy. But at the same time, I also want to enjoy the process. I don't I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't really want to be chucking in, 12 hours a day of work, um, just to try and get it out, earlier. But, like if it's not really going to work out, and for me, like I'd rather have 2 or 3 deep work sessions where I'm actually focused, I'm enjoying what I'm building, and I'm trying to be in that creative mood, as opposed to someone who, wants to have this super extreme routine just because, that might make things a bit more productive. I think really it's like, not every day where you enjoy your life is going to be a day where you've fallen behind. And I think the internet, a lot of people can just forget that quite easily because I think, especially online nowadays, it is just everything is framed with urgency, right? You're running out of time, you're wasting your potential. Everyone else is ahead, you need to start now. And it's just constantly hammering over and over. And that's sort of why I'm trying to be a lot more careful about the kind of content that I do sort of watch and I do consume. Because I think ambition is not the problem. I think part of the problem is borrowed ambition, wanting things because everyone else say they matter, feeling behind because, someone else created that timeline for your life. And for me, like I still want to work hard, right? I still want to obviously be able to make the money, but I don't want to, or like the whole process to be built on the feeling that I am constantly late, right? And that I'm running out of time, right? I want to obviously do things at my own pace. And if I genuinely believe that is something that works for me, then that's that. Um, and maybe it's the case that, I might ask myself, well, am I moving in a direction that actually means something to me? Because obviously I think online, part of that can get lost. But I think the reality is that if you're not careful, you can just spend years and years of your life, you know, that path maybe looks impressive from the outside, but doesn't really feel like your own. And for me, I want to work on things properly. I want to make progress, but I also want to live life a bit now as well. Because if the only version of the life I'm allowed to enjoy is the one where I've already achieved everything, then I'm probably going to spend most of my life waiting. I don't really want to do that. I don't really want to feel like the goalpost of life just keeps moving, and no matter, what I do, I will simply never reach the goal. I want to believe that I can enjoy life, and I would say at the moment, even though I don't really have much, or at least in terms of, I guess, money and whatever, I do enjoy life, right? I can work on the things that I want to work on, and that makes a bit of a difference for me. And yeah, I think that's just probably one of the most important things, just being able to go at things at your own pace. If you feel like you're making good progress and you want to, take some time to do whatever it is, play video games or whatever, you go and do that, right? And, maybe some of the things you do might not meet other people's expectations, but the reality is that it's your own life. So just sort of live it how you please.